Alright, so there's been a lot of talk on the internet about why the Dodges don't cool well, the air condition. And we're not talking about a brand new truck out of the showroom floor. I'm going to wing this video, so if it kind of sounds long-winded, I'm going to try to explain everything. But basically, I'm sitting here in my 1998 Dodge. I've been owning this truck almost since 98. I think I bought it in like 2000 or something like that. It was like 2 years old or whatever. As you can see right now, the air condition, I just turned it on. It's coming down pretty quick. It can get to about, let's see, you can see that. It's about at 55, 58 right now. It'll get down to about 42 degrees. Well, many people on the internet are having trouble after some time getting their air conditioning to cool, and they're trying all these things, talking about maybe the radiator, fan clutch, putting electric fans, all that stuff, and that's the temperature on the truck. I'll tell you why that's important in a little bit, but basically, to make a long story short, I am actually an air conditioning guy, so you know, we work on residential and commercial equipment all the time, so the understanding of the gauges and all that stuff is pretty common to us. Believe it or not, sometimes a car air condition can be a little trickier because you've got the clutch that's kicking on and off all the time, where in a house air condition it stays at one constant rate. So that, along with what trucks have, or not trucks, all cars use what's called a micro channel coil, and that's very important to this discussion, because that in the end was the real culprit to the whole problem. I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. If you're not an air conditioning guy, I'm not going to get into detail about why the pressures are certain numbers and all. I mean, it's just too much for the average person to really want to know or need to know. But I will try to show what certain numbers mean and all that good stuff. I'm trying to, there we go. The temperature's coming down. Just so you know, when I had this truck originally, when I bought it, the air conditioner had a leak in it, in the evaporator coil. And I replaced the evaporator coil, took this whole dashboard out, and it's not that hard to do actually. It takes a full day, but at the time everything else was working, so I just changed the accumulator / filter dryer and the coil. We were good to go, and it worked for another 6 to 7 years, I guess. Now we're sitting here in 2016. Pretty old truck, right? It's almost 17, 18 years old, but the dashboard looks pretty good, right? That's because I actually replaced the dashboard. I put one of these covers you put on there, replaced this panel right here and all. But anyway, so let me get down to the guts of what's going on here. See if I can show you. One more look at this before we go into it. Come on, focus in, focus in. Don't want to focus. You can do it. Come on. There we go. Oh, I don't want to focus. There we go. Anyway, you can see it's dropping. It's about at 50 now. It'll easily get to 42, 43 degrees. Alright, I'll be back in a second. Do you hear that hissing? It's right under the hood here. If you noticed, I turned the truck off. It went away fairly quickly. That's a key factor in understanding what's going on here. On these Dodge trucks, here's your condenser coil. That's a new coil there. I actually installed an electric fan, which, believe it or not, didn't do much, but here is your, and this line is not that hot. Normally it's hot, but because it's working correctly now, it just doesn't get as warm. And it's pretty cool out here today. This is your, they call this the liquid line. It goes here, right there, shoots along this firewall right here. And at about this point right here, you can see where the pipe is kind of riveted, and it's riveted here. Right inside here, right there, you have what's called your Orphis tube. Now in these Dodges, there is no accessible Orphis tube, which means if this thing gets clogged up, you have to replace the whole line, which it's not really that big a deal. I mean, I think the line was like $60 or something. I don't know. It is kind of a pain, but well, the air conditioner broke. Long story short, right? That's what I said. Air conditioner broke. I changed out the line, changed out the compressor, and I changed the accumulator. Got the air conditioner running. It would not cool well. It would get down to about 55 degrees. Sometimes I can get down to 50. It just struggled. So I said, well, I've seen it before. Condenser coil's probably clogged. So I changed the coil. Didn't help it at all. The key is to understand the gauges. Try to show you this here. When your gauges are hooked up on your low side, in between the 0 and the 50 is the 25 mark. On a 134A system, you should be running 35, which is about right there. You got 25, 30, 35. Now, that would be pretty standard at idle, maybe a little bit higher sometimes. If you were to press the gas pedal, you start the engine spinning faster, which means the compressor spinning faster. It'll tend to drop the pressure. The truck has a pressure switch, which if it gets down to 18, which is 25, 20, somewhere between there to 18, the pressure switch is going to cut the system off, which is right there, the green thing. That's sensing the pressure. It's turning the clutch on and off. Now, and there's your clutch down there. You can't really see it. It's at the very bottom there, under that, the rusty looking thing. In a perfect world, the pressure here is not going to drop to the 18 degree level until the temperature out of the vents is pretty cold, 42, 45 degrees. Why is that? It's because the way the system's designed, the compressor's pumping at a certain rate. There's so much Freon in the system. Everything's matched up, and that would be the perfect situation. But what was happening was, well, I'll tell you in a second what the real problem was. As I picked up speed in the truck, the temperature would drop much faster than it was designed, and the head pressure was running a little bit higher than normal. Okay. What that means is the compressor was kicking out too often, on and off, on and off, and as I stayed at high speeds, my air conditioner would not cool. Well, that's no good if you're running at 55, 60 miles an hour and you're getting warm air out of the vents. Or I say warm because, you know, you're expecting 45 degrees or so, and you're getting 50 to 55, which is bearable, but not highly comfortable. Let me explain something to you before I tell you what the root problem was. These condenser coils, they're called microchannel coils. That is because the lines that run in here, in this design here, this is actually not a microchannel coil, okay? Most cars, the condenser coil is a microchannel, and the evaporator coil in this truck is a microchannel coil, which I should have recognized immediately. But if you look real closely, you see that's a round tube. the tube inside of there is also round, which means they don't generally get blocked up. It's not common. A microchannel coil is a coil where these are flat. They're not round tubes. They're two pieces of flat aluminum crushed together with a slight gap in between them. They're much more efficient than a regular coil because they can transfer heat better because they have a larger surface area. But they're also prone to blocking because the gap between the fins is very, very small. So any particles get trapped, it'll clog the coil. That is, why do they do that? Well, they make microchannel coils because you can fit the same capacity in a much smaller space. I'll give you an example. This right here is the evaporator coil out of that truck. If you notice, you don't see any round tubes in there, do you? What you see is these flat things here, because these are essentially the same thing as the round tubes, but they're flat. Two pieces of metal squished together with a small line that travel back and forth. You see that? Back and forth. Well, you can compact a large capacity coil in a small area here to get the cooling you need. Well, the problem is, though, any particles get trapped, you start trapping all the particles in the evaporator, it becomes less efficient. Doesn't cool anymore. Also traps the Freon. What was happening is when I'd get out of the truck after I ran it, I noticed that hissing sound would last 40 to 45 minute, whatever, seconds. And it was really loud, which was telling me there was something really backed up in there, and it was taking a long time to equalize between the high side and the low side. It didn't dawn on me at first. I thought, oh, maybe my Orphis tube was clogged. Maybe I didn't flush out everything when I changed it, all the parts, and it got clogged. So I actually changed this twice, and it didn't help. I didn't want to change the evaporator coil because I knew it was going to be a nightmare taking that dashboard down. Yeah, it's relatively easy in the big scheme of things, but it takes a lot of time. Well, needless to say, here's the old coil. I changed the coil, and immediately after I changed it, everything worked fine. Because when the old compressor burnt out, it chunked a bunch of particles and trash through this coil and probably blocked up 40 or 50% of the coil, making the Freon have a tough time. It was almost acting like its own orifice, which was causing the pressure coming back to here to be low. As soon as I changed it and started running the truck, when I'd give it gas now, sure, it would drop some, but not nearly as fast, and it would come back a lot faster because the Freon throughout the system is able to flow more normal like it's supposed to. A lot of people on the internet kept talking about, oh, your system's not cooling because you didn't, maybe it's running hot, your truck's running too hot, all this stuff. But actually, so that's why I put this fan on there, because I really thought that was the problem, possibly. I just wanted to see if the fan would help at all, and it did not help. And then I thought, I have a brand new radiator here as well, and I put a new fan clutch, which is on the fan there. There's a fan clutch down there. I will tell you this. My old fan clutch kept the temperature in the truck lower, meaning it engaged more often. This new fan clutch actually engages what they consider normal, but I don't like it because it's a higher temperature than I'm used to. So I thought I contributed this whole mess to that, but it really wasn't the problem. This coil was running a lot hotter before I fixed it. I put my hand on there and it felt really warm. Ever since I've changed the expansion valve and the coil, and I have the system working properly, this coil doesn't get nearly as hot. If I watch the pressure on the high side of the gauge, it runs pretty close to normal. What is normal? It's hard to tell on these gauges because these are residential gauges for R22 system. So any gauge, you can always use a chart to map it. So I know that 40 degrees was what you're looking for, and that's about at 35 psi on here. So if you look at the outside number, that's what you're reading. The 35 here correlates to 40 degrees. Like if you're using a different Freon, the 45 for R22 Freon is 0 degrees. See that? Which is not the Freon we're using. If you're using 410, which is another Freon for homes, it would be 20 degrees. Well, we want 40 degrees, right? We want 40, but we're 134A. We want 40, but we're 134A. See, these are different Freons. Well, 134A is right there, would be the 35 mark. Some gauges have 134A, but obviously we work on homes, so that's not the gauges I keep. So the question is, where should this run? Well, it all depends on how hot it is outside. If it's 90 degrees outside, your high side will run 20 to 30 degrees higher. So that means you will be running about 110, 120 degrees on your gauges. Well, that correlates somewhere around here. Between 150 and 175 would be somewhere normal for about a 90 degree day outside, okay? So if your gauges are running around here, then you know you're probably doing okay. If it's spiking up here, you've got a problem. Something's blocked. If it's really low, you're probably low on charge, okay? So that's the story on the air condition. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and ask, and I'll see what I can do to get them answered.